Oh, survival shows.
F입니다.
You'd think that after the original produce rigging scandal, which resulted in the public's diminishing interest in these shows, companies in Mnet would learn to let it go. And yet here we are on the cusp of the 5th generation, and companies are still spending thousands to millions trying to recreate the magic of the initial produced series. But what happens when the Korean public moves on from the survival show format and look to other newer shows with broader appeal? Well, you attempt to bring in a new audience and hope for the best. It went from "this is Korea's next biggest group, only Koreans can vote" to "this is a global girl group." This all coincided with the glorious heights of BTS's collective success in the Western and global market. Yet, even with such success, BTS weren't being eased into the lifestyle of the Western pop market. They faced issues with language barrier, cultural barrier, prejudice, and racism. These 4 things are the main enemies that the K-pop industry is viciously attempting to beat in the upcoming years if they want to become more than a global niche. And so the somewhat sad conclusion the industry seems to have come to today is that in order to expand K-pop, the end goal is to globalize and localize, which means they want to sell an image, style, and concept that has ties to Koreanness, but they want to offer an alternative by removing said Korean faces fronting their ideas and music. It doesn't exactly mean that these companies want to snap their fingers and remove all Korean idols. That is not the case. But in the next few years, they do want to move away from the K-pop label abroad. And the only way of pushing past that prejudice and limited financial success leveraged by the Western, specifically American, music market is to sell the genre to the wider unfamiliar public with familiar non-Korean Western faces. If you really think about what globalization means to K-pop, it mostly only means localization in Japan and the US. And that's because the US and Japan have the biggest music markets in the world. Therefore, they can make the most capital and the most profit. But the reason why K-pop trying to form a base in America is so important right now and crucial to these companies at this moment in time is because, considering the history of America's domination of the global music market, having an American-based group means access to the entire world's music market. They're building Trojan horses, basically. You might think that comparing the existence of Western pop groups to the K-pop industry might be an entire reach. I know I've gotten those comments sometimes. As there is no system as strict, regimented, and perfectionist as K-pop, it's hard to see the similarity. However, the fact that K-pop as a genre has always consistently repackaged European, American, and overall just black pop music to sell to Korean consumers, it means that the genre has a lot more in common with Western pop groups than we think it does. K-pop and Western pop have always been intertwined, and now we are making that transition from Western pop inspiring K-pop to K-pop inspiring Western pop. Well, hopefully. At least this is what these companies wish the result of their ventures with high-profile American music labels will be. So let's talk about whether these 2 business ventures into the global or Western market will be successful, and what difficulties they'll face when entering this new pop market, and some of the glaring problems I have with these 2 survival shows, or survival documentaries, I should say. Then I'm going to get into some of my predictions. If you're a fan of A2K or Dream Academy, I don't think you're gonna like this video. Throughout the 2010s, the girl group was either dying or slowly becoming dead. The Western public just weren't really interested in them anymore. Some believe it was because hip-hop dominated the charts and pop music was out, or that One Direction's hiatus caused the whole teen pop idol thing to collapse. But what I think was one of the main causes in the disappearance of girl groups is a shift in Gen Z's collective public perception of pop artists and the pop genre over the past few years. In the early 2010s, when most of us were either children or tweens, we had lesser understanding of how the entertainment industry worked, and we cared less about someone or something being manufactured. But as we grew older throughout the 2010s, which was the decade that solidified the internet and social media as essential to our generation, we started to become obsessed with searching for that authenticity that the internet exposed us to in every form of media. First, there was the outcry about industry plants in the late 2010s, artists accused of having a manufactured started from the bottom image, when in reality their labels pushed them from the very start. Then there was the popularization of the term payola, thanks to the Barbs and the Bardi Gang for that one. And payola is basically just when labels pay to get on the radio, or I guess in today's day, since radio doesn't really matter that much, like you would pay for like places in popular playlists on Spotify probably. Then there was the nepotism baby scandal, in which the entire of Western Gen Z started dragging hundreds of actors and artists who got into the entertainment industry because of their family name and connections. Then there was the whole rise of clocking a PR relationship, in which numerous famous couples were accused of being PR ruses, meaning their relationships were staged for media attention. Due to the decline of the paparazzi and the rise of social media, soon enough everyone could clock when celebrities or their team were orchestrating run-ins with the paparazzi for attention. You could tell that Gen Z, an entire generation raised by the internet, had become sick of the traditional entertainment industry playing puppet master with who we should listen to, support or watch. The Western pop industry in particular is in a crisis right now with how to break new talent into the charts, because literally we are the pickiest eaters and have started clocking inauthenticity or stage success a mile away. So today, a lot of the old tricks used by the entertainment industry have been rendered useless. Now that I've said all that, what does that mean for pop groups and girl groups in particular? Well, it means that breaking a girl group into the Western music market has become extremely difficult. So much so, the big labels just stopped trying. Not only are pop groups formed using old tricks, but girl groups are twice as likely to be viewed as vapid or overly manufactured by the wider public, and have their music seen as chart fodder. It's also because, compared to solo artists in the West, being a bedroom girl group artist just doesn't connect. Like, you need to be signed, you need to have backing, you need money to even form a girl group. It's a lot different to how you would make it big as a solo artist. And speaking of old tricks, so old tricks like using series akin to the X Factor, international seasons of pop stars, or making the band type of shows, they all started to fail in bringing in young viewers for their new pop groups, because they use the same formula of putting the group together and the public was just tired of it all, like they weren't interested. Fifth Harmony and Little Mix was all we had left because they got in before this generational shift. The reason why girl groups gaining any significant traction were Korean was because they were accessible through the internet, and cultural differences made a small Western population overlook their manufactured roots. It's also because Korea has their own domestic stable idol industry where an ongoing system of multiple groups can thrive. Meanwhile, Western pop became a lot more selective, with only one girl group being able to be popular at once. There also seems to be a stronger sense of fan culture in Japan and Korea compared to the West, and the Korean public in particular have more respect for girl groups while having less of a stigma towards groups being manufactured industry plants. The best thing that has ever happened to Western girl groups in forever was the Y2K revival, which is still ongoing and has been since post-pandemic. Since Y2K was coming back into the public's focus, that meant that the Y2K glory days of girl groups could come back. At first there was Boys World, who gained semi-popularity through their earlier releases, but quickly they were viewed as dethroned by the now reigning Flow. This really goes to show how fickle certain girl group stans can be and how quick you can lose attention over one poorly received single. Now, the main point, and this is an important point that I want you all to remember throughout this video, and that's that if these groups aren't going to reach beyond the niche K-pop Western demographic, then there is no point. These companies aren't investing in these multicultural or American groups because they want us to like it. No, they're trying to reach beyond us, or else they'd stick to making Korean groups that we are already interested in. It's overcoming these 4 things that I mentioned earlier to make more profit that is their main goal. But I think both HYBE and JYP need to manage their expectations here, because if big American labels are already struggling with breaking new soloists into the industry, then breaking a girl group is going to be even harder. When I first heard that JYP was going to form an American girl group, I firmly told you that this probably isn't going to work, and that's down to a few reasons. Translating JYP's formula to a Western audience down to the songs, concept and survival show approach is very difficult. And that's when I got to my main statement and former prediction, which is where JYP will succeed in Japan, HYBE will fail. And where HYBE will succeed in the West, JYP will fail. And so far, I think I've been pretty right in my prediction. So first of all, the YouTube-based survival show A2K is pretty much another season of the NiziU project, but in America. It has a few adaptations that weakens the tough competition scene in a Korean survival show, but aside from that, the formula is pretty similar. The problem with this is that America isn't Japan or Korea, and this exact form of survival talent show is kind of ill-fitting for what the show could achieve. Overall, I think A2K should have come up with a different approach instead of relying on old tricks seen both in the Western and Korean pop music industry. I also think that the show is way too long, as in more than 12 to 16 episodes is pushing it. The challenges as well are very stereotypical too, and it's a bit of a drag because of that. A2K is very JYP centered, like most of his shows of this kind catered to Asia, but because the environment is so closed off and strongly features only JYP as the center of it all, it's just kind of awkward and hard to watch. I think the show could have benefited from maybe a consistent judges panel, or even maybe some special guests, call up Jessie, call up Lily, like let's use Lily's likability in the West for something. While in Japan or Korea, JYP has a strong reputation for creating hit groups, which is why he utilizes this reputation to sell these survival shows. He doesn't have that reputation in America. In fact, who's to say whether this girl group is actually going to be big in the Western market, because different to the group's Japanese or Korean predecessors, JYP's name again doesn't hold enough water within the public to reach that broader demographic the group would need to be a worthwhile business venture. So the sole selling point of A2K being his likeness and his ability to judge the American trainees just doesn't translate as well. And speaking of another aspect of the show that didn't translate well, which really got me, was the way they directly tried to use that caption text format you see in Korean variety, which just made me realize how strict they were with translating the show's original concept for a Western audience. I found it very jarring just naturally trying to watch the show and then the text comes up explaining to me what I can see, like I know what's happening, like I know I'm watching it, I can see. The whole time I was picturing what if Western reality TV was edited like this.
David's dead.
No, it's not. That is so sick.
It all seems like it's talking down to you and a bit babyish. And speaking of babyish, there were 3 little girls on this show named Kaylee, Gina and Misha, and they are between the ages of 12 and 14. I think that the group needs to be bare minimum older than 17 years old if they want to be taken seriously by the public and the American music industry. This is because having the tween label attached to the group just weakens your appeal to the general public and your ability to cash in. And more on the young girls on both Dream Academy and A2K a bit later, okay? I also don't envy these poor A2K trainees' position having to perform English JYP language versions, because English lyrics for JYP's songs usually don't flow or connect as well in the English language, so I can understand how difficult some of the trainees were finding it when they had to convey that JYP style, lyric and choreography, because JYP girl group music often has this cultural context of Koreanness, like cuteness or certain expression that can be quite challenging to replicate because we don't express ourselves in our westernized culture like that. It became no surprise to me that because of the sparse typical format applied here, that I saw a lot of people initially say that they were cringe watching or hate watching. I mean, I think the core issue facing A2K and this future girl group is that outside of maybe the show's more passionate watchers, people don't seem to take the A2K project seriously. And this brings me to something you might have been screaming at me all this time. It's America to Korea. So of course the show is going to be set up this way. Why am I questioning all of this? And this is where the confusion kicks in, because why? Why are we going from America to Korea in the first place? Who is this group intended for, America or Korea? See, I would have thought this group was for America with Korean influence, but it kind of seems lost with who they intend to target. And with the music performed written by JYP on the show, their pre-debut single, and the imagery for the group, we love the chicken girls.
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
And interestingly enough, here is where we stumble upon A2K's main problem. It overestimates America's investment in K-pop, and in the same breath it overestimates Korea's investment in foreigner-formed K-pop groups. As a global girl group, it should be pushing for a global reach like Flow, but instead it's giving more Black Swan. The problem with being the next Black Swan is that Black Swan are still on shaky ground and have gone for around 3 years trying to find their footing. It wasn't until now that Black Swan evolved past being mostly a gimmick for the Korean company they are signed to. Real ones remember BP Rainier. And even now, Black Swan lack a wider fandom in Korea to stabilize themselves, and they survive mostly off of a loyal, smaller international fandom. I feel like their girl group is probably going to suffer a similar fate of being stuck within that K-pop label with infrequent success, which might limit their global appeal. And I'm not saying A2K's girl group is going to completely flop, because look at that viewership, you know, it's not looking too bad. But I do think that with the way that A2K was formed, that this girl group is going to be lost in identity, and they're just going to be like a little like vanity JYP side project, like, not gonna lie. HYBE is kind of evil for what they did next, because they just showed up out of the blue like, oh, you think JYP doesn't understand the American market? Well, we do. Everybody get on Weverse. So HYBE's Dream Academy comes to fruition through marketing released right on the day of the Are You Next finale. Am I right about that? Like, the body wasn't even cold yet. Many believe that Dream Academy was a survival show, and it did look sleek and actually very appealing to its younger Western target demographic. The cute photos, concept teasers, and like semi-Korean inspired uniform, they really did make you feel immersed in this fantastical Dream Academy. They shot some of their performances in very well-known locations in America, and the trainees look a lot more put together and stylish compared to A2K. However, Dream Academy isn't a survival show, it's a Netflix documentary, and without seeing any documentary footage, HYBE asked of the audience to choose based on contextless missions. And I must say, even if it potentially robs the audience of that parasocial connection formed through a survival show, at first, you know, I admired this change and attempt to tackle the American market. But I will say, what is irritating out of all of this is the fact that this whole Dream Academy is marketed as a global girl group, as usual, global girl group that they say in all these shows. And then Bang PD in one of these little interviews is like, this is for America. Like, I'm sorry Korea, but you don't know what a global girl group or global group means. You guys are just saying buzzwords. Anyways, I mean, as I expected, HYBE recognized that survival shows and flimsy competitions just don't appeal to a wider Western demographic anymore, so they shook it up and went for a different strategy. It's risky, but I suppose a risk worth taking. One thing I will say about Dream Academy, which also relates to A2K's issues, is the prominence of featureism and colorism. Well, I think we all knew it was going to be this way if the show was going to take influence from K-pop standards of beauty, which is usually pale skin, smaller nose, bigger eyes and such. We can also see a lack of body diversity because a lot of Korean companies and dancers believe that being really skinny makes you a better dancer, or simply you just look more beautiful the less you weigh. The colorism is very present, with most of who the Korean industry considers representation for black contestants being lighter skinned. So we have two future girl groups where the lineup will not have one girl with skin darker than a paper bag. I think Dream Academy in particular really underestimated the popularity of black girls when it comes to girl groups, because Manon and Samara had the most attention and support from the K-pop fandom. What made me giggle was the halftime voting results, because it just lays out perfectly a lot of what HYBE was trying to avoid and the problems they were up against here. So the halftime results, which were the same as the first mission results, mind you. They revealed that the top 6 at the time was Nayoung, Samara, Yoonchae, Sophia, Manon and Lara. At this point, it seems pretty blatant that out of the 20 contestants, there are only 2 black girls whom we are seemingly supposed to choose one or the other based on how sparse they are. That's a 2 out of 20 chance a black girl has of making it into 6 places, similar to the South Asian contestants. But what's interesting about this is that Samara and Manon had the strongest following because people were rooting for them to overcome the odds before they even heard them sing. Then something really telling happened. Guys, I think the HYBE Dream Academy team were panicking after they clocked that all of their white contestants, who they gave the biggest chance next to their East Asian contestants, were all in the bottom ranks. The white contestants have less of a fandom because by nature of this being Dream Academy, the audience is rooting for who deserves their dream to come true most. And that's clearly the girls who come from a background that's usually sidelined and underrepresented in the K-pop industry and in girl groups as a whole. For white people wishing to work in the entertainment industry anywhere in the world, dreams like that come true every day. Also, by nature of Samara being from Brazil or Sophia being from the Philippines, they are more likely to draw in stronger support because those countries have a bigger K-pop fandom and are more dedicated compared to someone whose background is a smaller European country. And on top of that, because white people are not only seen as necessary for Western girl groups because they are the most marketable, many had less investment in the white contestants as a result because their dream is seen as more expected than inaccessible compared to other contestants. And the reason why ethnicity or nationality has started to play a big role in who gains popularity in Dream Academy is because there really isn't much else to go off on. So HYBE appears in their little commentary video with an evaluator and accused racist Melanie Fontana trying to bring in more attention for some of the white contestants, while simultaneously telling the audience that Manon skipped rehearsals. This was then made shady as one of Manon's friends on Instagram explained that she had missed rehearsals due to her being sick, and so this move to paint Manon as needing to push harder or not being committed enough came across as a bit forced as we had no context at this point. The evaluators followed through in the first mission eliminations by again reiterating the fact that Manon is not doing enough. I think HYBE needs to remember that global audiences don't really subscribe to the harsh standards of the K-pop industry, so when you try and bring in this she isn't working herself to the bone like narrative to try and change the viewer's perception of a contestant, it won't really stick. To those of us outside the strict K-pop world, being ill doesn't mean Manon's not pushing hard enough. And again here, with such little content, people have already made their minds up about Manon and subsequently the lineup. Like, she's probably going to debut even with HYBE trying to do this whole narrative about her. Like, all this has done is just made people more willing to vote for her because they know if she's out that top 6, HYBE's gonna axe her, like, we know. What irritated me about this as a whole is that if you're not going to have any episodes where we can rationally form our own opinions, you can't just swoop in here for a few minutes to try and gain control over the narrative and give us opinions on the girls in which we have no context for who they are. I personally think that HYBE should have released maybe the first episode of the documentary with the full cast. They could have given us a sneak peek from the beginning when interest was high. Then they could have done this but going silent, no episode route, followed by the eliminations all the way until the final girl group was formed. It would have more impact watching them back, as there would be hype to see what happened behind the scenes all this time before the final group was chosen. By giving us no episodes and no in-depth content, a lot of the eliminations feel unfair, and the prospect of the documentary seems uninteresting because, framing it this way, we aren't invested enough to want to know what's happening because we barely got to know these girls in the first place. Now, my conspiracy theory about all of this is that, considering how HYBE have previously erased black fans and have bragged about their white and East Asian fandom in the past, I think that they chose as minimal of those outside that demographic for diversity's sake, expecting their white and Asian audience to vote for those particular contestants. That's why they gave them a bigger chance. Then we arrive to the biggest dilemma scene, and that's cultural differences between the votes, because Koreans seem to be voting as well. Nayoung was the only Korean contestant who had gained popularity across global voters. Yoonchae, on the other hand's popularity is very surprising considering her visibility in the competition was very low. And so it was speculated that Koreans were voting for her while others were just voting for the Korean contestants, as they thought the group was supposed to be a K-pop group, not a global girl group. You guys, pay attention. It was either that or she was a filler vote for a lot of people who had their top 5 and needed someone else, so they defaulted to a Korean contestant. We've got a Urina on our hands here. Now, why is Yoonchae being in the top 6 a problem? So the most popular girls amongst global voters were all 18 and over or 17 and over, which is in line with the global K-pop fandom believing that minors should not debut. Yoonchae being pushed by the Korean audience becomes a problem because she is only 15 years old. Similar to A2K, there is a problem of having contestants under 16. As I've spoken about before, I probably, like everyone in the K-pop fandom knows what I'm about to say, but I just want to talk about it like a little bit. Now is not the time to try and break early teens and tweens into the Western music industry. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. Of course, there is this new attitude of disliking the idea of child performers or actors working in the entertainment industry, and with K-pop's reputation amongst the Western public being exploitative, it just doesn't mix well. And the cultural difference between the Korean and Western voters comes into play when you consider that America prefers girl groups with sexual maturity, and if the girls are underage, it severely limits their appeal. That's just business wise. But not gonna lie, knowing how evil the K-pop industry can be sometimes, they'll probably just try and give this girl group like some kind of mediocre, like sexy concept and then be like, yeah, whatever. Korea has a vastly different perception of idolization than most Western countries. Korean fans value innocence, youth, and naivety in their idols, but these 3 things don't sell in America as well as it does in Korea or Japan. In fact, it seems that in Korea, amongst their celebrities, it's all about enjoying your youth, being young, being a child, being a teenager, but it's always been in America like that's just so like, I'm not a little girl, like I don't want to be seen as a child, I want to be taken seriously. Like that's always been an image for most female performers. It's a tale as old as time, isn't it? Overall, Dream Academy is suffering from this paradox where they want nothing to do with K-pop, all the while using K-pop to its advantage because it's the only thing they have to get anyone interested. While I do think the rollout is a risk worth taking, it's not like HYBE is in the clear with this documentary idea. That rhymed. As it has a slim chance of gaining popularity amongst average Netflix viewers and could simply end up being a flash in the pan like what happened with Nasty Cherry. Spoiler for my next video, everyone. Like most people who heard about the aftermath of Are You Next, I find it difficult to trust HYBE with forming a balanced girl group because as much as they go on about talent, I think their core foundation of deciding girl groups through these shows is appearance, whether you're under 18, and marketability. That's why if they're going to be so judges based on these shows and make our votes mean nothing, then what's the point of even making this a public interactive experience? Like, just make your decision and call it a day. A lot of people often excuse or overlook K-pop's rigid and quite old-fashioned standard of beauty solely because it's accepted as a cultural difference. But if these companies are wishing to expand into the Western sphere of pop music, then claiming the reason why all the girls are lighter skinned, Eurocentrically pretty, and are built very skinny due to cultural differences, it just isn't good enough. With Dream Academy, which aims to form a real global girl group for America, you can tell HYBE is out of their depth here with what even is the norm for that market, because outside of the Korean music industry, the rest of the world would not view dancing and singing as comparable, as if singing in the music industry is just as important as dancing. The dance teams were severely put at a disadvantage, and if this is just a glimpse of what is to come, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, it could get worse. I think in general, A2K's girl group will be a global K-pop group, while Dream Academy's girl group will be a global group. A2K's will be a fun, maybe tween or teenager targeted group. They'll probably partake in some lukewarm Korean propaganda like most foreigners who work in South Korea do, if we're being real. However, I personally believe although Dream Academy might not have as much fanfare right now compared to A2K due to avoiding the survival show formula, I think that they'll be able to find more success than the A2K girl group, but not the kind of breakthrough success HYBE intended. I at first thought that Scooter Braun would have ensured Dream Academy's success because he can break anyone into the Western music industry, right? But he's been absent from the show's marketing and isn't really stable right now. But even then, they'll maybe have a TikTok hit or something, but I doubt their popularity will be consistent long term or truly mainstream. HYBE obviously is really trying to calculate a way to expand beyond the K-pop fandom and get the Western general public interested, even though there is no Western general public interested in girl groups. As much as I spoke poorly about JYP missing the mark with the American pop industry, you know what? At least he was self-aware enough to realise that global K-pop stans are probably the only ones who'd show some kind of interest in this project. I think the hardest pill to swallow for both JYP and HYBE, mostly HYBE, who's taking this very seriously, is that the American pop industry doesn't really need the touch of the K-pop system to make a group or artist successful. In fact, the K-pop system, even with its Western influences, is in direct parallel to the Western music industry of today. While Korean idols are getting younger and younger, with those born before 2004 being seen as too old for K-pop now, in the West, the average age of our biggest artists are born between 1995 and 2003. Sorry Olivia Rodrigo, but in Korea you're a hag. While Western artists are becoming more sexualized, Korean idols are becoming desexualized due to all the idols being underage. While the Korean pop industry follows the archaic nature of big labels controlling who is successful based on brand name, the Western pop industry has become decentralized, and the next biggest thing could be anyone coming from any label, no matter what prestige is attached to that label. While the Western pop industry is striving to push beyond this notion that skinniness is the key to success, the K-pop industry's one and only key to success is skinniness. While the majority of Korean idols have no more than a co-written B-side to their name and sing lyrics pushed onto them by their labels, the most popular Western artists today are songwriters who have more personal involvement in what they sing. It almost seems pointless to take the K-pop system and apply it to an industry that is actively trying to progress past the tactics that the K-pop industry promotes. It's also difficult to sell another market a system that you took and made more suitable for your own culture, and then trying to sell it back when its cultural differences end up hindering it. So thank you for watching. I'm back after a long time, but that's because I was working on something very big, and I think that may come out in a few months. Like, it will be here soon, but I spent a lot of time on that. I'm very excited to show you all, but right now I'm coming back and I'm going to be doing a lot of different things and fun things for my channel, so I'm excited. So I'll see you guys next time. Yay!